obvious one. Kansas City, that is rough. So Kansas City does not have a great O-line, and they're going to try to figure it out. And they're using a backup at left tackle that hasn't really started and been the man from the Niners. So, and it's a hard unit to create cohesion. And if you look at their first 10 games, even the teams that we view as weaker teams, like the Giants, good pass rush. Jacksonville, pass rush. Raiders, Max Crosby. So even the W's could create problems for them. Forget Denver that led the NFL in sacks. You face them. Conversely, the Chargers, Jim Harbaugh, look at his career in year 2, everywhere he goes. Chargers, revamped run game, high-end left and right tackles, have a cookie dough soft schedule in the middle of the season to gain momentum. So my prediction that the Chargers win this division with a weaker schedule really plays in the middle of the season. You're starting to get dinged up. You're not playing with full rosters. It is really soft for the Chargers. We've watched the Chiefs and Mahomes get blown out in 2 Super Bowls. It's always been the same reason. O-line's not right. Well, I think they're going into a season where the O-line's not right. Add another thing. Kansas City opens in Brazil. They have the most 7 primetime games. That's what the NFL does once you're the star attraction. They have the Lions on a short week. Oh, that's not good. They have the Buffalo Bills on a short week. Yeah, that's not good either. Remember that Brazil game last year? Philadelphia went to Brazil and beat Green Bay. The Eagles came back groggy, and the next week lost to the Atlanta Falcons. So that'll take some air out of the sails. Here's what we know. Andy Reid and Mahomes are as good as anybody in the world at what they do. But again, this team played on the margins last year. Okay? And I think with this O-line, the kryptonite to Kansas City in their 2 Super Bowl blowout losses has been the O-line. This going into a season, they lost Joe Thuney, is their weakest O-line. A little bit of finger crossing here. Last year's was okay going into the season, a bit of a mess at the end of the season. So this is not a team like Baltimore, Detroit, Philadelphia, with stacked rosters that are not playing on the margins. They're getting 7 or 8 blowout games a year. When margins shrink, everything counts. This team had the 3rd lowest point differential in the AFC West. So in their own division, Denver and the Chargers had more blowout wins. And I think Denver and the Chargers will be noticeably better. Bo Nix now into a 2nd year with Peyton. They had some interesting draft picks at running back and wide receiver. So the downside to becoming America's team is that the NFL, this is what they do. And I can remember after the Giants would win a Super Bowl and Coughlin and Eli, and they'd put them on Sunday night and they'd flex them in, and everybody loved it, except the Giants and the older players.
Okay. Let's talk about this, because this is pretty funny to me. Okay. First off, let's talk about point differential just off the top, because that's kind of where Colin's saying, oh, they had the 3rd best one in the in the division, and saying below the Chargers, and I assume it was the Broncos, and that those other teams had blowout wins, and the Chiefs had no blowout wins, and it's like, who cares? I mean, seriously, listen. Do you want the Chiefs to win last second or by, 3 points or less or, whatever every single game? Of course not. Of course not. But this idea that blowout wins means how great of a team you are, I just always find absurd. That's what the Dallas Cowboys do. Seriously, that's what the Dallas Cowboys have done season after season after season. They even did it in the start of last season when they were not a good team against the Cleveland Browns. And I remember saying, guys, Cleveland Browns isn't a good team. And they were like, yeah, they are. What are you talking about? They're the best defense last year. And it was like, no, they really actually didn't. You have to actually look and see what you were seeing. They gave up a ton of points to a ton of teams. Settle down. They have no quarterback. Come on. And they're like, no, this is what we do. This is what we do. And it was like, yes, I get it. Running the score up on a team that's not that good, makes you feel powerful. But recently, in the more recent side of things, let's look at some of the teams that had all these blowout wins. like I just said, the Ravens, the Lions, the Cowboys, like the 49ers. Have those teams won? Excuse me, I'm sneezing on the truth. Have those teams won Super Bowls? No, they haven't. Throughout the season, last year when the Eagles won the Super Bowl, they really didn't blow teams out. And I remember specifically when the Eagles beat the Panthers, you had Lions fans being like, oh, you almost lost that game, or you almost lost against the Jags. Like, we beat them by 45. And it's like, okay, well, there's a parade going on in Philadelphia and green and white confetti falling down the sky during the Super Bowl. So, like, who really cares? So, this idea of blowout wins meaning anything, it's football. I mean, some like blowout wins can happen for so many different reasons. I'm on the record saying this again and again and again. That if the Eagles and the Chiefs played each other 100 times, I do believe that the Eagles were the better team and would win more often than not. But do I think that, if they played 100 times, that they're going to blow out the Chiefs, that many times? Like, no. I mean, like, it was historical that it was like 40-6, 34-0. Like, that was historical the way how that unfolded. And I don't think that that's always the way how that game would have gone. But it is so interesting to me that even with kind of a rough O-line, like, this is what's so crazy to me. Let's just say, and I've already unpacked this before, but let's just say that the Chiefs O-line was actually like the worst in the NFL, which it actually really wasn't. But let's just say it was the worst in the NFL. It was historically awful, right? And I know they had a mixed bag throughout, but let's just say it was really bad throughout the season, and it was just the worst of the worst of the worst. They still found themselves in the Super Bowl, and they still won these games. They beat the Buffalo Bills the week before, 2 weeks before the Eagles with the same issues, the same team. If anything, the Chiefs were even healthier against the Eagles than they were the Bills. That's what Nick Wright even said. Super duper fan Nick Wright was like, the Chiefs are the healthiest they've been all season. And he was talking about how the Eagles were actually more banged up. So, and yet that team that was technically more injured against the Texans, against the Bills, still beat those teams. So I'm just failing to see. You can't use the Eagles, who were clearly a dominant, really special team that year, set the record for most playoff points scored. You can't use that as now like the indicator of who the Kansas City Chiefs are, because that's not who the Giants are. That's not who the Jags are. That's not who the Raiders. That's not who the Colts. That's not who the Cowboys. Like, that's not who the Titans are. Will some of these teams have a great pass rush against Patrick Mahomes and the Kansas City Chiefs, like the Broncos and the Chargers and the Ravens and the Lions and the Commanders? Like, sure, absolutely. But like they did, the other teams had great pass rushes, played the Chiefs as well last year. And yet every single game wasn't like the Tampa Bay Super Bowl or the Philadelphia Eagles Super Bowl. So I'm failing to see, listen, do I think that the Chiefs are in the driver's seat to be as dominant as they have been in years past? No. And that's okay. But I don't think like any team is like, the Eagles dominating the Super Bowl. Do I think the Eagles are in the driver's seat to just like, walk home with the number 1 seed in a first round bye? No, I do not. I don't, that's not the way how I view football, honestly. So, it is interesting to be like, oh, well, the point differential, and they won all these close games and they can't keep doing that. And I agree with that. Let's just say, and I don't know what the real number is, but let's just say they won 10 close games last season. However they typically define close games, I mean, we can't just say one score, because like pretty much all football games end up being one score. But whatever it is, they had to win these close, more nail biter games, which is true. and you're like, okay, well they went 10-0 in those games or something. They can't keep doing that, and I agree. But there's this idea that they would go from 10-0 to like 2-8 or something. Because I remember the Minnesota Vikings with Kirk Cousins and Kevin O'Connell had a similar thing where they were like, 9-1 in close games, and people were like, like that's tough, that's not sustainable, etc., etc. And it's not. And that's with Kevin O'Connell and Kirk Cousins. But this is Andy Reid, Spags, and Patrick Mahomes. So I think that they will always be better in these close games because I think it's part of their superpower and part of their culture. So again, do I think it's sustainable for them to do year after year after year, game after game after game? No, even Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid are kind of like, we don't want to keep doing this. We can't keep doing this. It's a stressful way to live. It will eventually break you. But again, I don't see it collapsing going from 10-0 to 2-8 or something. Like that's where we kind of take these takes too extreme to the other side of the spectrum. And so, Colin believes that the AFC West will be won by the Chargers, and I understand why. And this is where, Chiefs fans have a lot of confidence, and I understand why, but like they've evolved, and I saw this all last season because the Chiefs were struggling last season, and when they finally did face a great team, they got rocked. That's just the reality. And you can't say, oh, well, what about the injuries? What about the injuries? That doesn't really matter because throughout the whole season, you guys told me, Chiefs fans told me, this team is great. This team is great. They don't really, their season doesn't start until the AFC Championship game. And it's like, so it's, that was your logic. Every time I said, you know what, this team is not as good, they were like, yes, they are. Yes, they are. Yes, they are. So you can't use injuries as an excuse for that, because then you would have had to admitted that then the Chiefs weren't as good throughout the season, which many Chiefs fans were unwilling to do. Just read the comment section of any of my Kansas City Chiefs videos. And so, with all that said, though, we can't pretend that the Chiefs were this garbage team hanging on by a thread, because they clearly weren't. There's only so many consistently high quality, highly run, highly coached, highly prepared, highly played teams that are ready to go week after week after week. There's a reason why we consistently see the Eagles, the Bills, the Ravens, the Chiefs, when they're healthy, the 49ers, the Rams, why we consistently see the same cast of characters, the same teams, the same coaches in the playoffs year after year after year after year, because they can do things with such a higher degree of consistency. But I really do, want to tell Chiefs fans, though, don't automatically roll your eyes, though, because I now just went on a 10-minute rant defending them. Okay, no one can take that away. I just defended them for 10 minutes straight. But I also wouldn't automatically be like, oh, here we go again. Every year they always pick the Chargers. Just wait. Chiefs are going to be this. Like, it's not that easy either, because a lot of Chiefs fans had that mentality last season. And they ran into the wall of the Philadelphia Eagles. Now, I don't believe that every single team was as great as that Philadelphia Eagles team. The Chargers, maybe even the Eagles again when you play them week 2. But not the Giants, not the Jags. I'm pretty high on the Raiders. Not the Raiders. The Raiders are not who the Philadelphia Eagles were in the Super Bowl. This is not controversial. I'm high on the Buffalo Bills. They were not the Philadelphia Eagles in the Super Bowl. The Broncos, the Colts, the Cowboys. So even if some of these teams have great pass rushes, like the New York Giants, right? They might feast in that regard. We think that the Giants are now capable of having a score of 40-6, of 34-0. Come on, dude. Like, what are we saying here? Seriously. The Texans had a great pass rush. They still lost to the Chiefs. I mean, so I don't know. I think we take things a little too far, but at the same time, I think actually both sides. I think the Chiefs fans take it too far and just see themselves as still just unstoppable, inevitable. Nothing else matters. The regular season doesn't matter, etc., etc. And then I think the people who are now starting to doubt the Chiefs, they're taking it a step too far and are trying to pretend like you know, that the Chiefs are suddenly going to turn into a team like, I'm trying to think of a decent example. You know, what's a decent example of a team that's been like kind of good? I guess I don't want to say the Dallas Cowboys, but maybe almost like a team like the Houston Texans, where they got a little bit of momentum, even with the Deshaun Watson years. Like, they got a little bit of momentum. They're winning some games. Hey, we're in the playoffs. Like, hey, we can make a run. And, you know, but at any moment things can kind of collapse. And, oh, we lost our quarterback, and now we're really bad. And now we got to draft a quarterback. We're gonna fire our coach, and, you know, and it's just like things are all kind of just like, you know, think about, obviously Deshaun Watson, things got weird, but just think about how that team was like going, and then it just like popped. I mean, and they got lucky that they were able to get TJ Stroud and et cetera, et cetera. And it just, things got, like, I've said this before, like Deshaun Watson and the Texans were being positioned to essentially be Patrick Mahomes and the Kansas City Chiefs before that even happened. You know, before Patrick Mahomes was even Patrick Mahomes may have just been drafted, but certainly wasn't starting yet. And so it was just like, that's what that was supposed to be, and it just like didn't. And so this idea that the Chiefs are now just going to fizzle out of control and everything's just going to kind of pop and collapse, like, I just don't see it happening. I think even in their worst years, they're still going to be able to compete with these other teams, because we've seen these other teams, you know, I look at the Chargers and look at the Broncos last year. Those teams were clearly not elite, special, larger than life teams. And yet they were still able to find themselves in the playoffs because they did have good quarterback play. They did have great coaching, right? Like they were well run. You know, the corner was turned for those two teams, and they were able to find themselves into the playoffs. The Packers have had a really up and down season. They were able to find themselves in the playoffs because they had some pretty good quarterback play and some pretty good coaching. Like, as long as you have pretty good quarterback play and pretty good coaching, you most likely find yourselves in a position to, you know, get to the playoffs and, dare I say, maybe even make a playoff run. So as long as the Chiefs have pretty good quarterback play and pretty good coaching, I think they'll be in okay shape. But those are just my thoughts. I'd absolutely love to hear yours. What do you guys all think about the Kansas City Chiefs schedule, and you know, what it means for their chances of you know, being a great team next season? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single comment, so whether you agree with me or disagree with me, either way, let's get in some discussions, let's get in some fights, but ultimately, let's just have some fun. And please do consider subscribing. We're building an amazing community here, and absolutely love to see you part of it. I want to build something that we all genuinely feel connected to, something that we're really excited to be part of. I think we're well on our way to doing it. Please don't forget to give this video a thumbs up, as it really does help the visibility and the algorithm. Thank you so much. See you next time.